Let me start by saying, I never saw it coming. You know those stories where everyone around you can tell your marriage is falling apart, except for you? Yeah, that was me. I was the oblivious husband, the guy who thought everything was fine. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but nothing too serious. Or so I thought. My wife, Laura, always knew how to light up a room. She was the life of every party, and honestly, I liked that about her. I was more laid back, happy to just hang out in the background while she soaked up the attention. We balanced each other out, or at least I thought we did, but looking back now, I can see it. She loved the attention, craved it in ways I didn't fully understand at the time. For years I thought we had a good thing. We'd been married for 7 years, had 2 kids, and built what I believed was a solid life together. I worked hard to give us a comfortable home, paid the bills, and made sure we didn't want for anything. Laura? Well, she worked part-time and spent the rest of her time socializing. No big deal, right? Everyone needs their outlet. She was a bit snappy here and there, especially after she started going out more frequently, but I chalked it up to stress. But then one day, everything changed. It was a Saturday. We were at one of those family cookouts that Laura insisted we attend. She had been acting off for weeks, distant, sneaky even. But I was busy with work and the kids, so I didn't dwell on it much. Anyway, we're all there in the backyard, everyone laughing and having a good time. I remember it was a warm afternoon, and Laura was sitting across from me looking stunning as always. She was chatting with this guy, Todd. Tall, muscular, full of himself. You know the type. I didn't think much of it at first. Laura had always been friendly, maybe too friendly, but that was just her personality, right? As the day wore on, I couldn't help but notice they were getting a little too close. She'd laugh at everything he said, flipping her hair, giving him those flirtatious looks I hadn't seen in a long time. But still, I told myself it was all in my head. I mean, she wouldn't do that to me, to us, in front of everyone. Would she? It wasn't until later that evening when things got weird. People had a few drinks in them, and we were gathered around the fire pit. Laura and Todd were still sitting next to each other, practically whispering in each other's ears at this point. My stomach started to turn, but I kept telling myself to relax. That's when it happened. Laura stood up, looked right at me, then turned to Todd and kissed him. Not just a peck. No, this was a full-on, deep kiss, right in front of everyone. The entire yard went silent. I just stood there, frozen, as if my brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. My wife, kissing another man. And not just any man, but in front of our friends, our family, our kids. The humiliation washed over me like a tidal wave. When she finally pulled away from him, she had this smug, almost triumphant look on her face. Like she had just won some sick game I didn't even know I was playing. Everyone was staring at me, waiting for my reaction, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, my heart pounding, my hands shaking, feeling like the world had crumbled beneath me. But that wasn't even the worst part. After that public display of betrayal, I barely made it through the rest of that night. Somehow I managed to plaster on a fake smile, laugh it off when people tried to make jokes about it, even though inside I was dying. I told myself I'd talk to Laura about it later, when we were alone. I mean, what else could I do? 'Cause a scene right there in front of everyone? I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. That night, when we got home, I finally confronted her. I asked her what the hell was going on between her and Todd, and if she realized how humiliating it was to see her kiss him in front of our friends. You know what she said? She laughed. She brushed it off like it was nothing. Oh, relax. It was just a joke. You're being dramatic. It's not like it was serious, she said, rolling her eyes like I was the one being ridiculous. It was in that moment I realized the Laura I thought I knew didn't exist anymore. She was different, cold, dismissive. This wasn't the woman I had married. The tension between us grew over the next few days, the fights becoming more frequent. I could feel something was off, but every time I brought it up, she either dodged the question or turned it back on me. You're overthinking it, she'd say. Stop being so paranoid. The thing is, I believed her. At least, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this was all in my head, that maybe I was being too insecure. But deep down, I knew better. Something had shifted between us, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, the nagging suspicion that she was cheating wouldn't go away. Then came the night I'll never forget. It was a Thursday about a week after that awful cookout. Laura told me she was going out for drinks with some of her friends from work. Fine. No big deal, right? She had done it plenty of times before. But this time, something told me to follow her. Maybe it was the way she had been dressing lately. Always putting on more makeup than usual, wearing clothes I hadn't seen her wear in years, and looking like she was going on a date every time she went out with friends. Whatever it was, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. So I grabbed my keys, got in the car, and drove after her. I know, it sounds crazy, but I had to know. She didn't head to the bar like she said. No, she was going somewhere else. I followed her down a few streets, keeping my distance so she wouldn't notice. Eventually, she stopped in front of a restaurant. At first, I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe she was meeting friends after all. But then, I saw him. Todd. He was standing there, leaning against a car, waiting for her. She got out of the car, and the way they looked at each other, like they'd been waiting all day for that moment, it was all the confirmation I needed. My heart sank. But it didn't stop there. After dinner, they didn't part ways. No, they got into a taxi together. I followed them, my stomach in knots, barely able to breathe. I already knew what was happening, but I needed to see it for myself. I needed the truth, no matter how much it was going to destroy me. They weren't going to some hotel. No, they were bolder than that. The taxi stopped in a secluded area by the edge of town. That's when I saw it. Their silhouettes in the back seat, moving together, their bodies tangled in a way I couldn't mistake. They were having sex, right there, in the back of a damn taxi. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly I thought I'd snap it in half. My head was spinning, my heart racing. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I sat there in disbelief, watching the woman I had loved for so long betray me in the most blatant, humiliating way possible. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen, my world crashing down around me. But when I finally drove away, I knew one thing for sure. My marriage was over. When she came home that night, she acted like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just destroyed everything we had. But I knew better now. I knew the truth. And I wasn't going to let her gaslight me into thinking I was crazy anymore. I decided right then and there. I was filing for divorce. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together in that taxi. The image of Laura and Todd tangled up like that was burned into my brain. My mind kept racing, trying to make sense of it all. How had we gone from being a regular couple, raising kids, living what I thought was a decent life, to this? Morning came, and I was already sitting at the kitchen table when Laura strolled in looking as carefree as ever. She didn't even bother to hide the fact that she'd stayed out late. I watched her pour herself a cup of coffee, humming like nothing was wrong. "Hey," she said casually, not even looking at me. "Last night was fun. We need to do more stuff like that, you know?" The audacity of it. Her standing there, pretending everything was fine, acting like she hadn't just wrecked our marriage. My blood was boiling, but I knew I had to play it smart. I wasn't going to explode, not yet. I had a plan now. "Yeah, about last night," I began, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "Where exactly did you go? Didn't seem like you went to the bar." Her eyes flickered for a split second, just a tiny flash of something. Guilt, maybe? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her usual smug expression. "Oh, just met up with the girls," she said, shrugging like it was no big deal. Nothing special. I couldn't take it anymore. "Stop lying, Laura," I said, my voice low but firm. "I know where you went. I saw you." That got her attention. She froze, her hand hovering over the coffee cup, and finally turned to look at me. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice a little too high, a little too defensive. "I followed you," I said, keeping my eyes locked on hers. "I saw you with Todd. I saw what you did in the back of that taxi." For a moment, just a moment, I thought she might break. Her face paled, her eyes widened, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of fear. But then, like a switch had been flipped, she transformed. Her face hardened and she crossed her arms over her chest, glaring at me like I was the one in the wrong. "So what?" she snapped, her voice dripping with venom. "You were spying on me? Following me around like some pathetic stalker? God, you're so paranoid." There it was again, turning it on me. I'd just caught her cheating, and somehow she was making it about my paranoia. The gaslighting was so thick I could hardly breathe, but I wasn't falling for it this time. "I'm not paranoid, Laura," I said, standing up from the table. "I saw what I saw. I've been blind for too long, but not anymore. You and Todd, how long has it been going on? Was the kiss at the cookout just the beginning, or have you been lying to me for even longer?" She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, grow up. You're so dramatic. So what if Todd and I have been having a little fun? It's not like it means anything. You're just overreacting." Overreacting. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. She didn't care at all. There wasn't even a hint of remorse in her voice, no apology, no regret. Just pure, cold indifference. "Is that what our marriage is to you? Nothing?" I asked, my voice trembling with barely controlled anger. "After everything we've been through, all the years together, the kids, none of it matters to you?" "Oh, don't bring the kids into this," she snapped. "This is between us. And honestly, yeah, I'm bored, okay? You've been so wrapped up in work, in your routine, that you barely even notice me anymore. Todd, well, he noticed." It was like she was twisting the knife deeper with every word. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, cutting her off before she could spew more of her twisted logic. "I'm done. You want Todd? Fine, you can have him. But don't expect me to stand by and let you drag me through this any longer." Her face twisted into a cruel smile. "Good luck with that. You think you can just walk away? What about the kids, huh? What about the house, the bills? You think this is going to be easy?" I didn't answer her. I grabbed my jacket, walked out the door, and slammed it behind me. I needed air. I needed to get away from her, away from that house, and think. As I drove around, my mind raced. The anger, the betrayal, the humiliation of it all. It was suffocating. She was right about one thing, though. It wasn't going to be easy. Divorce was going to be a mess. We had 2 kids, a house, bills. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay with her. Not after what I saw. Not after she made it so clear that she didn't care. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew I had to get out before she destroyed me completely. The drive helped. A little. It gave me space to think, to breathe. But the anger was still there, boiling under the surface. How could it not be? My whole life was collapsing around me, and the person I trusted the most was the one lighting the match. By the time I pulled back into our driveway, I had convinced myself of one thing. I was going through with the divorce, no matter what it cost. When I walked back into the house, Laura was sitting on the couch, her legs crossed, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. Not a care in the world. I couldn't understand it. How she could be so casual, so detached after what had just gone down between us. "Have you calmed down yet?" she asked without looking up, her voice dripping with that same smugness that drove me up the wall. I ignored the question and went straight for the paperwork. I'd started researching divorce lawyers during my drive, and I knew I'd have to act fast. The sooner I filed, the sooner I could move on. But as I started looking for documents in the study, I heard her voice again, louder this time. "You're really going to go through with this, aren't you?" she said, her tone almost mocking. "You think you can just walk away and leave everything behind? The house, the kids, our life?" I turned to face her. And for the first time in a while, I didn't feel the urge to yell or scream. I was just done. "I don't have a choice, Laura," I said quietly. "You made that clear. This marriage, it's over. You ended it the moment you started sneaking around with Todd." She stood up from the couch, finally giving me her full attention. "Oh, please, stop acting like the victim here. You were the one who checked out first. You're always working, always gone. What did you expect me to do? Sit around and wait for you to pay attention to me? I deserve more than that, and Todd was willing to give it to me." "You deserve more?" I repeated, incredulous. "What about the kids? What about everything we built? Doesn't any of that matter to you?" She crossed her arms and sighed, as if I was boring her with the conversation. "Of course it matters, but I'm not going to waste my life being miserable just because you can't figure out how to balance work and family. And honestly, Todd makes me feel alive again." That was it. That was the moment when I realized just how far gone she was. This wasn't the woman I fell in love with. This wasn't the mother of my children. She was a stranger, standing in front of me, tearing everything apart without a second thought. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and sadness. "You're just going to throw away 20 years of marriage for a fling with some guy who barely knows you?" She rolled her eyes again, and I swear it took everything in me not to scream. "It's not a fling, and I'm not throwing away anything. I'm taking control of my life, something you've clearly forgotten how to do." I stood there speechless. The audacity, the lack of remorse, it was like she wasn't even capable of feeling guilt, like she truly believed she was in the right, and I was just some obstacle in her path. "I'm filing for divorce," I repeated, this time with more conviction. "And you can do whatever you want with Todd, but you're not going to drag me through your mess any longer." She smirked like she was daring me. "Good luck. You know the courts usually side with the wife, right? You'll be paying me alimony and child support for years. You really think you're going to walk away from this without losing everything?" There it was, the real Laura. It was never about love, never about the marriage or our family. It was about control. She thought she had all the cards, that I was trapped, and that no matter what I did, she'd come out on top. But I wasn't going to let her win that easily. I started gathering up documents, sorting through bank statements, deeds, everything I'd need for the lawyer. Laura watched me from the doorway, her arms still crossed, her smug smile never leaving her face. "You're not as strong as you think you are," she said, almost taunting me. "You're just mad that I beat you to it. Maybe if you'd been paying attention, we wouldn't be here." I snapped. I slammed the folder I was holding onto the table and turned to her, anger flooding through me. "You're right. I wasn't paying attention. I trusted you. I believed in you. And now, you've made it clear that trust was the biggest mistake of my life." She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. "You want Todd? Fine. Go to him. But don't think for a second that I'm going to let you take me for everything. I'll fight for the kids, I'll fight for the house, and I'll fight to make sure you get exactly what you deserve." For the first time since this nightmare started, I saw something crack in her expression. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was just the realization that I wasn't going to roll over and let her walk all over me anymore. "Fine," she said coldly. "Let's see how tough you really are then. Good luck." And with that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there with nothing but the mess she had made of our lives. I knew then that this divorce was going to be a war, and I was ready for it. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to wrap my head around everything that had happened. Every moment with Laura, every argument, every fight over the last few months, it all started to make sense. She wasn't just distracted or stressed. She had already checked out. She had already made her decision. I was just the last to know. By the next morning, I was more determined than ever to get the ball rolling on the divorce. I made a few calls, setting up meetings with lawyers. It was all business now. If Laura wanted a fight, I was ready to give her one. But what I didn't expect was just how quickly things would spiral. That afternoon, I picked up the kids from school like I always did. They were laughing, telling me about their day, and for a moment, I felt a sense of normalcy. It was a nice distraction from the chaos at home. But as soon as we pulled into the driveway, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Laura. "We need to talk. Now." My stomach dropped. I knew this wasn't going to be good, but I had no idea just how bad it was about to get. After getting the kids settled inside, I found Laura pacing in the kitchen, her face red and her hands clenched into fists. She didn't even wait for me to ask what was going on before she launched into a full-blown tirade. "You filed for divorce already?" she screamed, her voice echoing through the house. "You didn't even give me a chance to explain. You just ran off like a coward and went straight to a lawyer?" I crossed my arms, trying to stay calm. "Explain what, Laura? I caught you with Todd. What more do you think you need to explain?" Her face twisted into an ugly snarl. "You don't know the whole story, okay? But now you've made it impossible for us to even talk about it. You've ruined everything." I laughed bitterly. "I ruined everything? You've got to be kidding me. You've been sneaking around, lying to my face, and now you want to play the victim? Number, I'm done listening to your lies." Her eyes blazed with fury. "You don't know what you're talking about, you idiot. Todd isn't even the problem here. You are." There it was again, that twisted logic of hers, somehow making this all my fault, as if her cheating was justified because I wasn't paying attention or working too much. I was sick of it. "You know what, Laura? I don't care anymore," I said, my voice cold. "I'm filing for divorce and there's nothing left to talk about." Her face went pale for a second, like she hadn't expected me to actually go through with it. But then she snapped back, her lips curling into that smug smile again. "Oh, we'll see about that," she said, her voice dripping with malice. "You think you're just going to walk away from this without losing everything? You don't even know what's coming." She stormed past me, grabbing her purse off the counter and heading for the door. I didn't bother asking where she was going. I didn't care anymore. But then, the door slammed open, and in walked Todd. Yes, Todd. The same guy I had caught with Laura just days ago. He strolled into my house like he owned the place, his arm casually draped over Laura's shoulders. They were laughing, completely unfazed by the fact that they were standing in my kitchen. My blood boiled. "What the hell is he doing here?" Laura smirked, leaning into Todd like they were some kind of power couple. "Oh, didn't I mention? Todd and I are going to be living together. Since you've decided to make everything so difficult, I figured it'd be easier if we just got it over with." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not only had she moved on without a second thought, but she was flaunting it right in front of me, right in our home. "You can't be serious," I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. "You're bringing him into our house? Around our kids?" Todd chuckled, clearly enjoying every second of this. "Relax, man. It's not like I'm some random guy. I've known Laura for a while. The kids will be fine." That was it. I couldn't hold back anymore. I lunged toward Todd, ready to wipe that smug grin off his face, but Laura jumped in between us, pushing me back. "Stop!" she shouted. "You're not going to touch him." I glared at her, my chest heaving with anger. "You think you're just going to replace me? That Todd's going to walk in here and be some kind of new dad to our kids?" Laura didn't even flinch. "The kids will adjust. They'll see that Todd and I are happier than you and I ever were. You've been a miserable father anyway." Miserable father. Those words hit me harder than any punch could have. I loved my kids more than anything, and now she was trying to poison them against me, trying to make me out to be the villain in her twisted little fantasy. But I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let her take my kids and destroy everything I had worked for. "You want him?" I spat, pointing at Todd. "Fine, but don't think for a second that I'm going to let you take the kids. You can play house with Todd all you want, but I'm fighting for full custody." Laura's eyes widened, and for the first time I saw real fear in her face. She knew I wasn't bluffing. "Good luck with that," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "You'll never get full custody. I'm their mother. The courts will side with me." I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. "We'll see about that." She stood there for a moment, frozen, unsure of what to say. Then, without another word, she grabbed Todd's hand and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. As soon as they were gone, I collapsed onto the couch, my head in my hands. I knew the fight was only just beginning, but I was ready. I wasn't going to let Laura take me down without a battle. And if Todd thought he could waltz in and replace me, he had another thing coming. This war was far from over. I spent the next few days in a blur, bouncing between lawyers' offices and trying to figure out my next move. Laura hadn't come back home since she stormed out with Todd. She didn't even call to check on the kids, which told me everything I needed to know about where her priorities were. It was like she had turned into a completely different person overnight, someone who didn't give a damn about anything except her new life with Todd. Meanwhile, I was trying to keep things together for the kids. They were confused, of course. How could they not be? Their mother had just up and disappeared, leaving me to explain why everything felt so upside down. I tried to be strong for them, telling them that Mom was just going through something, but they weren't stupid. They knew something was wrong. But what hit me hardest was how quickly Laura started playing dirty. It was the morning of our first mediation session. I had barely slept the night before, going over every possible scenario in my head, wondering what kind of tricks she and her lawyer might pull. As I was getting dressed, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a text. From Laura, of course. "We need to talk. Don't bring the kids to school today." My heart sank. I didn't know what she was up to, but I knew it wasn't good. I texted her back, trying to stay calm. "What's going on, Laura? I have a meeting today. The kids need to be at school." Her reply came almost instantly. "I'm picking them up. They're coming with me. Todd and I are taking them to his place." I couldn't believe it. She hadn't even asked, hadn't mentioned anything about wanting to spend time with them. Now, out of nowhere, she was demanding to take them away. My blood boiled, but I knew I had to handle this carefully. She was setting me up for something. "No," I typed back, my hands shaking. "You don't get to just take them whenever you want. We need to discuss this through the lawyers." Her response came just as quick. "They're my kids too, and I'm their mother. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. I couldn't lose it now. Not with the kids still in the house, but the rage inside me was building by the second. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was, Laura, standing there with Todd by her side, looking more smug than ever. She didn't even bother to hide the fact that Todd was with her. It was like they wanted to shove it in my face, to make this situation as unbearable as possible. "We're here to get the kids," Laura said, her tone cold and detached, like she wasn't talking about our children but some kind of property she was entitled to take. "Like hell you are," I growled, stepping in front of them. "You don't just show up here with him and expect me to hand them over." Todd, the smug bastard, chuckled under his breath. "Come on, man. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. The kids will be fine with us." I clenched my fists, my body shaking with anger. "Get off my property, Todd. You don't get to walk into my home and take my kids." Laura sighed dramatically, as if I was the one being unreasonable. "We're doing this for them, Rick. They deserve to know that things are going to be okay. That's why Todd and I are taking them out for the day, so they can start getting used to the idea." "Getting used to the idea?" I echoed, my voice rising. "The idea of what exactly? That you're replacing me with him? That this is all normal?" "They need stability," she said, crossing her arms. "And clearly you're not providing it." My vision went red. Stability? She was the one who had blown our family apart, parading her affair in front of everyone. And now she had the nerve to talk about stability? "The only thing you're providing them," I said through gritted teeth, "is a front row seat to your selfishness." But Laura wasn't listening anymore. She had already made up her mind. "I'm taking the kids, Rick. You can't stop me." I blocked the door, refusing to move. "You're not taking them anywhere until we go to court. You don't just get to decide things on your own." Todd took a step forward, clearly trying to intimidate me with his size, but I didn't budge. "You don't want to make this ugly, man. We can do this the easy way, or we can do it the hard way." The hard way. The words hung in the air like a threat. But I wasn't going to be bullied in my own home, not by Todd, and certainly not by Laura. Fine, Laura snapped, grabbing Todd's arm. We'll go to court. But don't think for a second that you'll win this. I'll make sure the kids know who the real problem is. I stared at her, barely able to believe the person she had become. This was the same woman I had built a life with, the same woman I had trusted with everything. Now she was standing here, threatening to tear it all apart. And for what? For him? You've already lost them, Laura, I said quietly. You just don't know it yet. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. But then she turned on her heel and walked away, dragging Todd with her. As they disappeared down the driveway, I slammed the door behind me, my heart racing. This wasn't just about the divorce anymore. This was about my kids. And if Laura thought I was going to roll over and let her take them, she had no idea what was coming. The fight had only just begun. The next few days were a blur of meetings with lawyers, paperwork, and a constant, gnawing anxiety. I couldn't get Laura's smug face out of my head, couldn't stop thinking about how she had shown up at my house with Todd, trying to take the kids. It was like she had no shame, no sense of what she was doing to them, or to me. But one thing was clear. She was out for blood, and she wasn't going to stop until she got what she wanted. My lawyer, Jeff, was a no-nonsense kind of guy. He had dealt with plenty of messy divorces before, and he didn't sugarcoat anything. She's going to push you to the edge, Jeff said during one of our meetings. She'll use the kids as leverage, play the victim, and do everything she can to paint you as the bad guy. You need to be prepared for that. I nodded, trying to take it all in. I knew he was right. Laura wasn't going to play fair, and I had to be ready for whatever she threw at me. The kids were still confused, asking when they'd see their mom, and I couldn't bring myself to explain the full situation. How could I? How do you tell your children that their mother has decided to move on with another man? That she's been lying to all of us? Every time they asked about her, it felt like a punch to the gut. And then, out of the blue, came another bombshell. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I had just picked the kids up from school, and we were heading home when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to answer it. Hello? I said, putting the phone on speaker so I could keep driving. Is this Rick? A woman's voice asked. She sounded nervous, almost hesitant. Yeah, this is Rick, I replied, glancing in the rearview mirror at the kids, who were laughing and chatting in the back seat. Who's this? It's Carla, Todd's wife. My heart stopped. I hadn't even thought about Todd having a wife. How had I not considered that? Of course, he wasn't just ruining my marriage, he was destroying his own too. I'm sorry to call you like this, Carla continued, her voice trembling, but I think we need to talk. I pulled the car over to the side of the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Go on, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I know about Laura and Todd, she said, and I could hear the pain in her voice. I've known for a while, actually. But I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to stop it. I swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. How long? I asked quietly. How long have they been seeing each other? There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then she answered, a little over a year. Over a year. My heart dropped. This wasn't just some recent affair. Laura had been lying to me for an entire year. Every time she left the house, every time she smiled at me or kissed the kids goodnight, it had all been a lie. I'm so sorry, Rick, Carla said, her voice breaking. I thought maybe they'd stop, that it was just a phase, but it kept going. I didn't know how to tell you. I was numb. Why are you telling me now? Because, she said, her voice suddenly firmer, I'm filing for divorce. I'm done with Todd, and I thought you deserved to know everything before you walk into that courtroom with Laura. I couldn't breathe. My entire world felt like it was spinning out of control, but somehow I managed to keep my voice steady. Thank you for telling me. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Carla replied. Just be ready. Laura's going to fight dirty and Todd will back her up. But you're not alone in this. I'm on your side. With that, she hung up, leaving me sitting there, staring at my phone in disbelief. Over a year. The woman I had spent my life with had been betraying me for over a year, sneaking around with a man who had a wife of his own. I felt sick, but I couldn't let the kids see that. I had to keep it together, for their sake. I pulled the car back onto the road, heading home while they continued to chatter in the back, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing all around them. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the living room staring at the divorce papers Jeff had prepared. I couldn't get Carla's voice out of my head. Her pain mirrored my own, but at least she had the courage to confront Todd. She was taking control of her life, while I was still standing in the wreckage of mine. I picked up the phone and called Jeff. "We're going all in," I said as soon as he answered. "Laura's been seeing Todd for over a year. I want to fight for full custody. I don't care what it takes." Jeff didn't hesitate. "Good. We'll start preparing immediately. But Rick, be ready. This isn't going to be easy. Laura's going to come after you hard." "I don't care," I said, my voice hardening. "She can come at me with everything she's got. I'm ready." But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but wonder, was I really ready? Could I actually go through with this, fight Laura for custody, and somehow come out the other side? There was no turning back now. The war had officially begun. I woke up the next morning with a new kind of resolve. Carla's call the day before had flipped a switch inside me. For over a year, Laura had been lying, sneaking around, and making a fool out of me. But now the gloves were off. It wasn't just about ending the marriage. It was about protecting my kids and taking back control of my life. The first thing I did was meet with Jeff again. I told him everything Carla had said about the affair lasting over a year, about how Todd and Laura were already planning their next move. Jeff was a pro, and he didn't flinch. "This helps our case," he said, tapping his pen against his notepad. "If we can prove the affair's been going on for that long, it strengthens your argument for custody. Judges don't look kindly on parents who disrupt their kids' lives for something like this." I nodded, feeling more confident. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'm not losing my kids to her." "We'll gather everything we need," Jeff said. "Witnesses, documentation, anything that shows Laura's behavior over the last year. And if we can get Carla to testify, even better." I hadn't thought about Carla's role in all this, but Jeff was right. If she was willing to stand up in court and expose Todd and Laura's affair, it could swing things in my favor. It was time to call her again. Later that evening, after the kids were in bed, I dialed Carla's number. She answered on the first ring. "Rick," she said, sounding almost relieved. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you." "I need your help," I said, not bothering with small talk. "You said you're filing for divorce from Todd, right?" "Yes," she replied. "The papers are already in the works." "Good," I continued. "I'm fighting for full custody of the kids, and I could really use your testimony in court. If you're willing to tell the judge about Todd and Laura's affair, how long it's been going on, it could make a huge difference." There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost hear her thinking it over. "I'll do it," she finally said. "Todd deserves to face the consequences, and so does Laura. I'll testify if it means helping you." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Thank you, Carla. This means more than you know." "I just want this nightmare to end," she said quietly. "For both of us." After I hung up, I felt a sense of momentum building. Things were finally starting to fall into place. With Carla's testimony and Jeff's strategy, I knew we had a fighting chance. But just when I thought I was getting the upper hand, Laura struck again. It was a Friday morning, and I was getting the kids ready for school when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I opened it cautiously. Standing there was a man I didn't recognize, clean-cut, suit and tie, holding an envelope. "Rick?" he asked, looking me dead in the eyes. "Yeah, that's me," I said, my stomach already sinking. The man handed me the envelope. "You've been served." I ripped open the envelope right there in the doorway, my hands shaking. It was from Laura's lawyer. She was filing for emergency custody of the kids, claiming that I was an unfit parent and that the children were unsafe with me. The accusations were vague, but the message was clear. Laura was coming after my family with everything she had. My mind raced as I skimmed through the paperwork. How could she do this? How could she claim that I was unfit when she was the one who had blown up our marriage, dragged Todd into our lives, and walked out on us? And yet, here she was trying to turn the tables to make me look like the problem. I wanted to scream, to punch a hole in the wall, but I couldn't afford to lose control. Not now. Not when she was playing dirty. I called Jeff as soon as I could. "She's going for emergency custody," I said, my voice tight with anger. "She's claiming I'm unfit, that the kids aren't safe with me." Jeff sighed on the other end of the line. "This is typical in cases like this. She's trying to paint you as the villain to justify her actions. We'll have to fight this head on. Do you have any documentation of your time with the kids? Texts, emails, anything that shows you've been the primary caregiver since she left?" "I've got texts from her when she was out with Todd," I said. "And I've been the one picking up the kids from school, taking care of them. Everything." "That's a good start," Jeff said. "But we'll need more. I'll get an investigator on it, someone to document your parenting routine. We'll also need to build a defense against her claims. Whatever she's saying about you being unfit, we need to disprove it." I couldn't believe how far Laura was willing to go. She wasn't just trying to win the divorce. She was trying to destroy me, to make sure I had no place in my kids' lives. But if she thought I was going to lie down and let her take everything, she was dead wrong. "We'll fight this," Jeff said, his voice steady. "But it's going to get ugly. Be ready for that." Ugly didn't even begin to describe it. Later that day, I dropped the kids off at school and drove home, my mind reeling from everything that had happened. Laura had served me with papers, tried to paint me as an unfit father, and was coming after me with a vengeance. I couldn't believe this was the same woman I had built a life with, the same woman I had loved. I sat down on the couch staring at the divorce papers, the custody filings, and all the legal documents scattered across the table. It felt like my world was collapsing, but I couldn't afford to crumble. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my kids. And no matter what Laura threw at me, I wasn't going to let her take them away. I was going to fight with everything I had. The battle was just beginning. Things escalated quickly after Laura served me those papers. I knew she was going to play dirty, but I hadn't expected it to get this vicious. Every day felt like a new round in this never-ending fight, and no matter how much I tried to stay ahead, she found new ways to drag me down. It was exhausting. I met with Jeff again that Monday, and we began preparing for the emergency custody hearing. He'd already spoken to Carla, who was ready to testify about Todd and Laura's affair. We had documentation, witnesses, and every shred of proof we could gather to show that Laura was the one who had upended our family, not me. But it didn't change the fact that she had fired the first shot with this emergency custody move, and I was scrambling to catch up. "Here's what we're going to do," Jeff said, tapping his fingers on the stack of documents on his desk. "We'll focus on showing that you've been the primary caregiver since she left, that the kids are doing fine under your care, and that this sudden custody request is just a tactic on her part. The affair with Todd is important, but right now we need to keep the focus on what's best for the kids. The judge won't care as much about the affair unless it directly affects their well-being." I nodded, though it was hard to keep my emotions in check. Every time I thought about Todd and Laura and how they were already acting like some kind of twisted couple, it made my blood boil. But Jeff was right. The judge wasn't going to care about my feelings. They were going to care about the kids. "Do you have any idea what she's going to say in court?" I asked, already dreading the lies she was probably planning to tell. "She'll likely try to claim that your emotional state is affecting the kids. Maybe even that you've been neglectful since the split," Jeff said. "But we'll be ready. The more documentation you have of your routine with the kids, the better." It was a long week leading up to the court date. Laura hadn't spoken to me directly since she served me those papers, but she'd been texting me constantly, demanding to see the kids, throwing in little jabs about how this was all my fault. I kept the messages, knowing they might come in handy, but it was draining me. The kids could feel the tension too, though I tried to keep it from them as much as possible. They were confused, asking why Mom hadn't come by to visit. I didn't have a good answer. On the day of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse with Jeff by my side, bracing myself for whatever Laura had planned. As soon as I entered the courtroom, I saw her sitting with Todd, whispering in his ear like they were at some kind of social event. She looked confident, like she had already won, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. The hearing began, and as expected, Laura's lawyer went straight for the jugular. She painted a picture of me as a stressed, emotionally unstable father who had been struggling since the separation. She claimed that the kids were upset in my care and that they needed stability that only she could provide. I sat there, biting my tongue, wanting to scream at the lies she was spewing. It was like I was listening to a stranger talk about me, not the woman I'd been married to for over a decade. When it was my turn, Jeff laid out our case with precision. He presented the timeline of Laura's affair with Todd, backed up by Carla's testimony and text messages from Laura that showed her neglecting the kids to be with him. We showed that I had been the one taking care of the children since she left, that their routine hadn't changed, and that they were happy and healthy under my care. But the real bombshell came when Carla took the stand. She didn't hold back. In front of the entire courtroom, she detailed how Todd and Laura had been sneaking around for over a year, meeting in secret and lying to both of their families. She spoke about the nights Todd didn't come home, how he would spend hours with Laura instead of his own children, and how he had been pulling the same crap with her that Laura was now pulling with me. Her testimony was brutal, and I could see Laura squirming in her seat as the judge listened intently. When Carla finished, the courtroom was dead silent. I felt a wave of relief, knowing that we had exposed Laura's lies, that we had shown the court who she really was. But that relief was short-lived. Laura's lawyer stood up and went on the offensive again, twisting Carla's words, trying to make it seem like Carla had some personal vendetta against Laura and Todd. It was sickening to watch, but Jeff had warned me this would happen. The judge took everything in, listening carefully as both sides made their final arguments. And then, after what felt like an eternity, they spoke. I've reviewed all the evidence presented here today, and while both parties clearly care for their children, I believe the current arrangement should remain in place until a full custody hearing can take place, the judge said. I see no reason to grant emergency custody at this time. My heart soared. It wasn't a complete win, but it was enough. The kids would stay with me for now, and Laura's attempt to paint me as an unfit father had failed. She couldn't just rip them away from me. As the judge wrapped up the hearing, I glanced over at Laura. Her confident smirk was gone, replaced with a look of pure fury. She knew this wasn't over, but she had lost the first round, and she hated it. Todd stood up and whispered something to her, trying to calm her down, but it was too late. I had won this battle, and now I was more determined than ever to win the war. When we left the courtroom, Jeff clapped me on the back. Good work, Rick. This isn't over, but today was a big win. I nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and relief. Thanks, Jeff. I couldn't have done it without you. But as I walked to my car, the weight of everything still hung over me. Laura wasn't going to stop, and Todd was right there fanning the flames. I knew the custody battle was just beginning, and things were going to get uglier. But for now, the kids were safe with me, and that was all that mattered. The war wasn't over, but I was ready for the next round. The days after the hearing felt like a strange calm after the storm. The immediate threat of Laura taking the kids was over, but I knew better than to relax. This was just the beginning of the legal battle, and she wasn't about to back down quietly. Every day felt like I was waiting for the next punch to come, and it wasn't long before it did. A week after the hearing, I got a message from Laura. No hi or how are the kids, just cold calculated words. We need to meet. I have a proposal. I couldn't even bring myself to respond right away. A proposal? What was she up to now? Whatever it was, it couldn't be good. Still, I had no choice but to hear her out. I agreed to meet her at a local coffee shop, hoping this wasn't another setup for more drama. When I walked in, she was already sitting at a table with Todd next to her, looking as smug as ever. I felt the rage bubbling up inside me just seeing them together, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't the time to lose it. "So what's this about?" I asked, sitting down across from them. Laura didn't waste any time. "I think we both know this divorce is going to drag on for a long time. The court hearings, the custody battles, it's all going to get messy and expensive." I clenched my jaw, already sensing where this was headed. And I'm willing to settle," she said, folding her hands in front of her. "Let's avoid the mess. We agree on joint custody. You keep the house, and I'll waive any claim to alimony. In return, you agree to sell the house within 6 months and split the profit. We can both walk away with a clean slate." It took everything in me not to laugh out loud. After all the damage she'd done, she thought she could walk away from this with a clean slate, like none of it mattered. Like the affair, the lies, and trying to take my kids were all just things we could brush under the rug. "No," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm not interested in any deal you and Todd cooked up. We're going to court and I'm fighting for full custody." Laura's eyes flashed with anger, and for the first time, Todd spoke up. "Rick, come on, man. This doesn't have to be a war. Laura and I are offering you a way out. You know this isn't good for the kids, dragging them through court." I turned to him, my blood boiling. "Don't you dare talk to me about what's good for my kids. You have no idea what's best for them." Todd leaned back, raising his hands as if he was the reasonable one here. "Hey, I'm just trying to help, but you keep pushing this, and it's going to get ugly. For everyone." I stared at him, not blinking. "It already is ugly, Todd. Thanks to you and Laura." Laura sighed dramatically, like I was the one being difficult. "Rick, be reasonable. You know how this is going to end. The court isn't going to give you full custody. Why drag it out?" "Because I'm not giving up on my kids," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not going to let you two waltz into their lives and pretend like everything's normal. You've already done enough damage." She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. And you made your choice a long time ago, Laura. You threw away our marriage and now you're trying to act like I'm the one being unreasonable? I'm not signing anything. We'll see each other in court." Laura glared at me, her expression icy. "Fine, but don't say I didn't give you a chance." Todd stood up, ready to leave, but before they could walk away, I leaned forward, my voice low. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you can just erase everything we built together and start over with him? But you haven't won anything, Laura. You've lost everything, and you don't even realize it yet." For the first time in months, I saw a flicker of doubt cross her face. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear. Either way, I knew I had struck a nerve, but she quickly masked it, grabbing her bag and storming out of the cafe with Todd trailing behind her. I sat there for a moment, watching them leave, feeling the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on me. This fight wasn't going to end anytime soon, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't going to let Laura and Todd control the narrative anymore. This was my fight now, and I was in it for the long haul. The next few months were a roller coaster of court dates, custody hearings, and legal maneuvers. Every day was a battle, but slowly, I began to see the tide turning in my favor. Carla's testimony had been crucial, exposing the full extent of Laura and Todd's affair. The judge didn't look kindly on Laura's actions, especially her attempts to manipulate the custody situation. In the end, the court granted us joint custody, but the victory was mine. The kids would primarily stay with me, with Laura having visitation rights on the weekends. It wasn't the full custody I had wanted, but it was enough. Enough to know that the kids would stay in a stable environment, away from Laura's chaos. As for Laura and Todd, their relationship didn't last long after the court battles ended. Maybe the stress of everything had gotten to them, Or maybe they were never meant to be. I didn't care. They were out of my life, and that was all that mattered. The day the divorce was finalized, I stood in the hallway of the courthouse looking at the papers in my hand. It was over. The nightmare that Laura had dragged me into was finally over. I had lost a lot. My marriage, my trust in people, but I hadn't lost the most important thing, my kids. As I walked out of the courthouse and into the sunlight, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. The fight was over, and I had survived. Laura had tried to humiliate me, tear me apart, and take everything from me. But in the end, I had won the only battle that really mattered. I was free.